The Anunnaki came not with blessings, but with blueprints. Not to save mankind, but to engineer it. They descended upon Earth, not as gods, but as gold miners from Nibiru. They did not teach us language. They programmed us to obey. They did not give us freedom. They gave us function. Why have we never been told this? Why do ancient texts like the Lost Book of Enki describe flying ships, genetic manipulation, and celestial wars thousands of years before modern science? Could it be that what we call myth is simply classified memory? In this video, you will uncover the hidden history of the Anunnaki, the rebellion of the Igigi, the exile of Alalu, and how the tablets of destiny once dictated the fate of planets. We will follow Enki, the creator god, as he crafts the first humans from clay and code, and Enlil, the commander, as he enforces divine law with a wrathful hand. You'll discover why Earth, known as Ki, became the battlefield of heaven, and why the gold hidden in the Abzu was never just a resource, but a divine ransom. This story is not just a story, it is a mirror. It reflects our origin, our programming, and our path to awakening. Because once you understand who made you, you can finally decide who you become. If this ancient knowledge stirs something in you, comment below. Were we created or repurposed? Like this video to help it reach other seekers, and subscribe to reclaim what was lost. Let the veils fall. Let the tablets speak. The journey begins now. Nibiru, the planet of eternal cycles and civil war. Nibiru was not a paradise. It was a wounded realm, suspended in a majestic orbit far beyond the reach of Earth's understanding. A place of volcanic skies and royal rivalries, rich in gold, yet starving for peace. The Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to Earth, did not descend from utopia. They came from a planet slowly dying, wrapped in a thick atmosphere that once protected them, now torn by ages of conflict and neglect. The planet's orbit, long and elliptical, carried it far from the sun for long stretches. In these cold ages, its volcanoes once erupted with power, releasing the particles that sustained its celestial shield. But with time, the eruptions dwindled, the atmosphere thinned, and so began the cries for salvation. Gold, when finely ground and suspended in air, became their only hope. Not as wealth, but as a balm, a planetary medicine, one that could mend the skies and protect generations. But Nibiru's greatest wound was not in its heavens, but in its people. The Anunnaki Atlanteans, born of hybrid lineages, part divine, part exiled, split into two great nations, the North and the South. Brothers turned enemies. Tribes turned armies, and from the valleys to the mountain thrones, weapons of terror rained devastation. This wasn't myth. This was trauma recorded in star charts and lapis tablets long before the first temple rose in Sumer. They called it the War of the Bloodlines. Cities turned to ash. The skies darkened with dust, and as the last towers fell, silence blanketed Nibiru. But within that silence, a choice emerged. A truce, one throne, one king. A lineage chosen not for conquest, but for union. A monarch from the north would marry a maiden from the south. Through their sacred child, a new dynasty would rise, one with the double seed of both lands. This was the beginning of the royal line that would birth Anu, the High King of Nibiru, and from his house, Enki and Enlil. It was also the birth of rivalry not yet resolved, for the very laws that tried to mend Nibiru's fate would later fracture Earth's destiny. And here, beneath the gold dust and regal vows, lies a truth we must not ignore. Civilizations don't fall in a day. They fracture slowly, from within. We often think peace is the absence of war. But on Nibiru, peace was the fragile bandage wrapped around generational wounds. It was a ceasefire of power, not a healing of the heart. And as they looked to the stars for gold, they carried with them unresolved pain. Pain they would later plant into Earth's soil. What might we carry forward that we haven't healed? What happens when the same hands that dig for salvation also sow division? Alalu the exile. When a king fell from the stars. Before Earth knew his name, Alalu was king. He ruled not by birthright but by force, a warrior who challenged the throne in desperation. While others debated, he acted, and for a time he reigned. But his grip on the throne slipped, not through war alone, but through a deeper betrayal, the betrayal of law, of legacy, of the sacred bloodlines. Anu rose to challenge him. Two giants locked in a final primal battle, not behind palace walls, but in the public square, where dust met flesh and gods bled like men. Alalu was defeated, and exile awaited. But he would not go quietly. He took a celestial ship, stole away from Nibiru, and cast himself into the void, not as a fugitive, but as a seeker of redemption. Through asteroid fields and death belts, Alalu soared, crossing what we now call the Hammered Bracelet, the asteroid belt, remnants of shattered Tiamat. He alone survived what no Annunaki before him could. And on the seventh planet, Earth, he found it. Gold. The salvation of Nibiru. But what did he find first? Gold or purpose? Alalu, stripped of crown and kin, found on Earth a silence that Nibiru never gave him. He walked through swamps alone, tasted the sweetness of unknown fruit, tested the waters, and felt the first winds of a planet that would one day hold his bones. Here's what they don't tell you. The first Anunnaki to step foot on Earth did not come as conqueror. He came as a broken king, a lost father, a hopeful exile. And in that solitude, he reconnected with something deeper than royalty, the raw soul of survival. It is easy to judge Alalu by the end of his story, but few pause to see the sacred start. He risked everything to break the cycle. He crossed the void not with an army, but with a prayer, that the gold he found might earn him more than a throne, perhaps forgiveness. Would you have done the same? Gold and the breath of Nibiru, salvation in the form of dust. The gold of Earth was never ours. It was medicine for a dying sky, for a people beyond our stars. To the Anunnaki, gold was not currency. It was breath. It was life. Suspended in the atmosphere of Nibiru, it acted like a mirror and a shield, deflecting radiation, sealing rifts, restoring the balance lost when the volcanoes fell silent. Alalu's discovery was a miracle, but miracles demand messengers. And so Enki, son of Anu, lord of the deep waters, was sent to Earth to verify the claim. With reverence and calculation, he descended not just to retrieve gold, but to prepare a world for extraction. This was not conquest. This was surgery. But the Earth did not yield its treasures easily. In the swamps of Eridu, Enki found water, fruit, minerals, and traces of resistance. Gold existed, yes, but not in abundance, not yet. The greatest veins lay deeper, hidden beneath the mantle, waiting to be mined, not with force, but with understanding. Thus began the first sacred labor. Ditches were dug, waters were sucked, soil was tested. Enki, ever the scientist, watched the moon's orbit and named the months. He tracked the sun's cycles and marked the seasons. Earth became a clock, a temple, a system. But here's what most forget. In their quest for salvation, the Anunnaki did not just take from Earth. They named it, they blessed it, they built cities, Eridu, the first among them. They called it home away from home. They consecrated the seventh day as a day of rest, and in doing so, they seeded rituals that still echo in our own traditions. Sabbath, sanctuary, the sanctity of time. Still, gold remained elusive, and pressure from Nibiru intensified. What began as a mission of hope slowly bent into a burden. The Anunnaki worked tirelessly. The yields were small, the work was hard. And so, desperation crept in again. The same desperation that once split Nibiru now stirred beneath Earth's soil. And in this holy labor, a lesson lives. Not all that glitters is grace. Gold may shine, but it also enslaves. It promises healing, but demands sacrifice. It binds kings to exile, brothers to war, and gods to labor. And even in its purity, it cannot restore what the soul refuses to release. We must ask, in our world where gold still drives nations, what are we trying to heal? And what have we already lost in the digging? From the heavens of Nibiru to the swamps of Eridu, the journey for gold was never about wealth. It was about survival. And as the Anunnaki dug deeper, they would soon uncover something far more precious than metal, a species born not by nature, but by design. The next chapter is not about the gods. It's about us. Earth, Ki, the chosen battleground of the gods. They called it Ki, the seventh planet from the sun, veiled in oceans and crowned with snow. To the Anunnaki, Earth was more than a destination. It was a last hope, a sacred challenge, a planet rich with resources and yet untouched by divine order. Its rivers ran with purity, its soil bore the breath of Tiamat, the mother world destroyed in a celestial war long forgotten by man, but etched in the memories of the stars. When Alalu landed, he found not only gold, but the raw heartbeat of life. And when Enki arrived, he saw something even more precious, a potential unlike any other. Earth was wild, untamed, but filled with energy. It offered resistance, yet whispered welcome. It was as if the planet itself had been waiting, not just for miners, but for meaning. The gods began their work. They built Eridu, the first city, and sanctified the seventh day as a day of rest, a rhythm still echoing through our modern weeks. They named the waters, marked the moons, traced the paths of stars, and called the land Eden. But beneath the divine order, a silent tension brewed. Enlil, son of the High Queen Antu, looked upon the earth with command. Enki, firstborn of Anu, looked upon it with curiosity. Two brothers, two visions, one fragile world. The battle was never only over gold. It was over who would define Earth's soul. Enlil believed in order, control, separation. Enki believed in harmony, experimentation, and partnership with nature. This divine polarity between domination and communion would not only shape the Anunnaki's mission, but the very DNA of humanity to come. And here lies the lesson. Earth was never a backdrop. It was always a mirror. What the gods brought, we inherited. What they fought over, we now live through. And even today, between walls and forests, between borders and dreams, we reenact that ancient tension, the command to dominate versus the call to steward. We must ask, were we meant to rule the earth or to heal with it? Enki versus Enlil, two brothers, two visions, one planet. In the courts of Nibiru, blood meant hierarchy. But on earth it meant conflict. Enki, though the eldest son of Anu, was born of a concubine, wise, scientific, compassionate. Enlil, younger but born of the queen, held the title, the authority, and the will to command. On earth, their differences deepened. What began as a mission to extract gold quickly unraveled into a silent war of ideologies. Enki looked to the marshes, to the creatures, to the breath of life already moving through Earth's veins. He believed in coexistence. He walked barefoot among the reeds, learning from the rhythms of the planet. Enlil, by contrast, erected walls, drew lines in the soil, and began to divide. He built structures for control, he assigned roles, he measured obedience. Their conflict was subtle at first, a disagreement about who would command Eridu, about where new settlements would rise, but deeper still was a tension of destiny. Enki sought evolution, Enlil sought order, and neither saw the other as wrong, only dangerous. Their father, Anu, descended from Nibiru to mediate. In an act of divine casting, lots were drawn. Enlil would rule Eden, the structured heart of civilization. Enki would rule the Abzu, the gold-rich underworld, far to the south. A balance was struck, but peace was not born. They each took their domains, yet their eyes remained on the same sky. History often glorifies kings and silences their brothers. But in this tale, both held a truth. Enlil's order gave rise to cities. Enki's wonder gave rise to life. Yet their conflict laid the foundation for every empire and rebellion to come. Think of it. Every war between ideologies, every debate between science and structure, every system that praises law while silencing spirit, it echoes their divide. And we are their echo. A lesson emerges. The greatest danger is not difference, it is division without dialogue. When vision becomes dogma and brotherhood becomes rivalry, even gods forget they share the same stars. The creation of man, engineered for labor, not worship. The Annunaki had gold, yes, but they did not have time. The labor was great, the yield too small. The workers grew weary. The Igigi, once proud celestial beings now bent under the burden of toil, rebelled in silence, then in fire. Their tools were dropped. Their voices rose in the night. And the gods listened. Enki, keeper of knowledge, bearer of compassion, offered a solution. Not rebellion. Creation, not punishment. Innovation. He proposed a being, not born of Nibiru, but of Earth. A hybrid. A helper, a primitive worker. And thus, in the House of Life, beneath the lands of Abzu, Enki and his sister Ninhasag began their divine experiment. They took the seed of the gods and mixed it with the blood of Earth's own creature. A hominid, upright and aware, but limited. Through trial and pain, through song and code, through clay and breath, they birthed the first Lulu, a man. This man was not holy. He was functional. He could carry the baskets, he could dig. He could obey. He could bleed. But then something happened. The gods looked upon him and they saw themselves. He began to dream, to name, to question. He was not just tool, he was mirror. The story of Genesis says, "Let us make man in our image." It was not poetry, it was history. The Lulu bore divine essence, but none of the rights. He was divine, yet disposable. Powerful, yet enslaved. And from that moment, the fate of humanity was set on a course both miraculous and tragic, born of stars, bound to soil. Do we not see it today? The tension in our veins, between obedience and freedom, between serving systems and seeking spirit. We toil in cities built not for us, under rules we never agreed to, yet we look to the sky and wonder who we truly are. Here lies the ultimate truth. We were not created for worship. We were created for work. But within us burns a spark, one they did not expect. Consciousness, the cry for meaning, the defiance to rise, and perhaps that is why they began to fear us. The earth changed that day. Not because gold was mined, but because man was made. A creature who could carry burdens, but also carry dreams. And as this dream awakened, so too did the next great question. Not what we were made to do, but who we were made to become. The gods had given us form, but soul, that would be our rebellion. The next chapter does not belong to Enki nor Enlil. It belongs to the children of Earth, and what we choose to remember. The betrayal of Anzu and the stolen tablets of destiny. In every kingdom there lies a key, not of gold or stone, but of control. For the Annunaki, that key was the tablets of destiny, mysterious cosmic instruments encoded with the laws of time, space, and fate. These were no mere artifacts. They were the source code of creation, determining who ruled, what moved, and how stars and bloodlines obeyed divine design. Only the highest, chosen by both seed and spirit, could possess them. But power invites hunger, and hunger, betrayal. Anzu was not a stranger. He was one of their own, a prince among the Igigi, commander of Mars, once a loyal servant. But beneath his wings stirred unrest. He had seen too much, watched too long. He knew the weariness of the workers, the silence of the gods, the fire that had burned Alalu's name into the red dust of exile. And in a moment when Enlil left the sanctuary, Anzu did the unthinkable. He seized the tablets. With them, he fled. And for a moment the order of the heavens broke. Planets trembled. The constellations wept. Enlil was enraged. The gods were stunned. For without the tablets, not even the throne of Nibiru held meaning. Without the code, chaos whispered. Ninurta, son of Enlil, was chosen to retrieve what had been taken, not with anger, but with clarity. He soared through the skies of Earth, seeking the traitor. And when the battle began, it echoed not with hatred, but with divine sorrow. Javelins failed. Arrows missed. Anzu had been strengthened by destiny itself, but Ninurta, guided by wisdom, used a Tilu missile, not to destroy, but to disable. A storm of dust rose. The tablets were recovered. Anzu was taken. In the judgment that followed, there was no glory, only grief. Anzu was sentenced to death, but Enki, ever the healer, said no. Let him be buried beside Alalu, he spoke. Let them rest together, for their seed was the same. And thus, on the red plains of Mars, two graves marked the price of power. Here is the lesson. Even in betrayal, there is lineage. Even in rebellion, there is memory. The ones who break the rules are often the ones who reveal their weakness. Anzu did not steal to destroy. He stole to awaken. But the gods were not yet ready. And are we? What would we do if we held the tablets? Would we rewrite the laws or restore them? The seeds of division, Marduk, Ninurta, and the bloodline war. No empire falls from outside. It crumbles from within. After Anzu's rebellion, a silence fell across the heavens. But beneath that silence, a greater war had already begun. Not with weapons, but with lineage. Enki's son, Marduk, born of Damkina, daughter of Alalu, bore the blood of two rival thrones. He was ambitious, wise, and bold. He believed the earth should be his domain. He saw himself not as servant, but as heir. But Enlil's son, Ninurta, was the legal successor. Born of Enlil and Ninlil, blessed by the law, trained in command. He was a warrior of structure, a soul of balance. And so it began, not a battle of blades, but of visions. Marduk, who sought expansion. Ninurta, who guarded order. One looked to the stars, one held the stone. The gods tried to mediate. Anu watched with sorrow. Enki, though loving his son, knew the danger of unchecked ambition. Enlil, though loyal to his line, feared what war could do to the earth. But the division deepened. Cities chose sides. Workers murmured. The Igigi remembered Anzu, and in the temples of Eridu and Nibiru, prayers turned political. Marduk established his base in Babylon, a city destined to rise, fall, and rise again. He aligned with the Igigi, the Watchers, those cast from Eden. He promised them dominion, elevation, and wives from among the Lulus. Forbidden unions were formed. Bloodlines were blurred, giants were born, the Nephilim, and the earth groaned. What began as a quarrel between brothers became a cascade. The law of seed clashed with the law of succession. Divine children rose against their own creators. The stars became chessboards, and earth, once a mission of healing, turned into a theater of inheritance. This is not myth. It is memory. We see it in every royal house, every fallen dynasty. Every system built on blood, cracking beneath the weight of ego. And in it lies a truth we must face. Legacy, when left unexamined, becomes a curse. A question remains. Is lineage more important than love? Is order worth more than freedom? Lessons from the Abzu, where the gold flows and hope dies. While the heavens argued, the earth endured. Far in the south, in the golden lands of Abzu, what we now call Africa, Enki worked. He built chambers of stone, tunnels of breath, machines that pierced the planet's skin. The gold was deep, sacred, and resistant. It did not give itself easily. The Annunaki toiled in the darkness, their skin burning in the sun, their backs bent to the will of necessity. The gold was gathered, purified, and sent to Mars. From Mars, it was launched to Nibiru, a shining dust rising like incense to the dying skies. On Nibiru, the atmosphere began to heal, the tears in the heavens mended, the people rejoiced. For a time, hope returned. But on Earth, the cost was rising. The Igigi on Mars grew restless. The Lulus in Abzu were weary. The gods, once mighty, were now managers of quotas. Enki, the father of man, watched with silent sorrow. He knew what they had built and what they had broken. The earth was bleeding, not from war but from labor, and then the gold began to thin. The veins were not endless. The output slowed. Enki explored further, tracing rivers, studying maps written in the bones of mountains. He found new deposits, yes, but he also found a deeper question, one that echoed in the caverns of his soul. At what point does healing become harm? At what point does salvation turn to sacrifice? The Abzu had once been a place of promise. Now it was a grave of energy. The people began to question, the gods began to retreat, and in the silence of the shafts, something new stirred. Not rebellion, not revolution, but revelation. The Lulu were not just tools, they were watchers, they were dreamers. They had begun to speak of freedom, of destiny, of sky and stars. And Enki listened, not with fear, but with awe. For in their eyes he saw what the gods had lost, wonder. And perhaps that is the true gold of earth, not the metal in the ground, but the fire in the soul. As we trace these stories, we are not only uncovering history. We are remembering what it means to be human, to carry pain, to seek purpose, and to rise even when born from dust. The next chapter awaits. but its author is not written in the stars. It is written in us. Final judgment. The day the heavens were torn. There came a day when even gods had to answer, not to higher powers, but to the consequences of their own creation. The earth had been shaped, cities had been named, mankind had been formed, and the gold had flowed, from the bowels of the Abzu to the skyways of Mars, from Mars to Nibiru. Yet amid the glory of celestial trade and atmospheric healing, the fracture of heaven deepened. It began, as all reckonings do, with a forgotten promise. Alalu, once king, once exile, once the first to touch Earth's soil, had been left behind. Stripped of honor, cast to Mars, he had died alone, not in shame, but in silence. Yet his memory burned in the bloodline of Marduk. His name echoed through the halls of judgment, and his vengeance took root in the hearts of the Igigi. And when Anu returned to Earth, as ruler and father, he came not to command but to reconcile. What awaited him was not obedience but challenge. Alalu's final act, unthinkable, unforgettable, had left a scar on the king's flesh and on the divine order. In rage and humiliation, Anu demanded justice. Enlil demanded death. Enki again stood between retribution and restoration. But the seed had already been sown. The Annunaki now knew. Divine blood was not immune to pain. The gods could bleed, and when gods bleed, men begin to question. So the seven who judge convened, not behind closed doors, but beneath the open skies of Eridu. The tablets of destiny glowed on the altar. The warriors stood silent. The workers watched from afar, and in that moment a line was drawn, not between God and man, but between what was promised and what was lived. Anu ruled that Earth would no longer be the playground of disputes. Enlil would reign over Eden, the north, the structured plains. Enki would be lord of the Abzu, the south, the land of depths and waters. Marduk would be sent east, his ambitions delayed but not denied. And to the children of Lulu, to the humans, came a proclamation: "You were made in service, but shall walk in freedom." It was not redemption, but it was a beginning. What we inherit from that day is not the silence of gods, but the echo of choice. Justice is not the absence of punishment, but the presence of wisdom. And when power trembles, peace begins. But peace, like gold, does not come freely. The echo of the heavens. What does it all mean for us today? We stand now at the edge of an ancient tale, a story not merely told in stones or scriptures, but etched in the very marrow of our being. The Annunaki have long departed. The cities of Eridu and Nibiru lie beneath dust. The golden rivers of the Abzu are still. Yet the question remains, if we are the children of design, if we were engineered not in love but in necessity, what then are we becoming? The answer is both simple and sacred. We are becoming the authors of our own genesis. What Enki and Enlil began, what Marduk and Ninurta fractured, what the Igigi fought for, it now lives within us as choice. We are not bound by the purpose they gave us. We are drawn forward by the meaning we discover. The gold in our veins is not metal, but memory. Memory of fire, of exile, of divine DNA woven with dirt and dreams awakened in rebellion. Look around our world today. Artificial intelligence learns faster than we can teach it. Genetic engineering moves closer to gods than ever before. Power flows not only from temples or thrones, but from screens and signals. And once again, we ask, who writes the code? Who holds the tablet? The tablets of destiny are no longer myths. They are algorithms. And the battle is not between stars. It is between awareness and amnesia. But there is hope. there is always hope. Because the same hands that once labored in the mines now paint visions, build homes, raise children, heal bodies, and dream futures. The same species once seen as tools now crafts poetry, writes music, questions everything, and stands for truth even when gods fall silent. We are not accidents, we are echoes. And every echo, when embraced, becomes voice. So here is a simple truth, wrapped in the cloth of an ancient tale. You were made to carry burdens, but you were also made to awaken. You were made to serve, but you were also made to remember. The gold that once saved Nibiru was never the truest treasure. The real salvation was in what the Annunaki feared the most, that one day their creations would rise not in rebellion, but in consciousness. And now the stars look down and wait. So ask yourself, not with fear, but with faith. What will you do with the fire that runs in your bones? What will you build with the breath of gods and the soul of earth? Comment below. Do you believe we were created by design or destined by spirit? And if this truth stirred something within, subscribe and share this light. For perhaps, just perhaps, our greatest purpose is to remember we were never only made. We were chosen to evolve. The story of the Annunaki is not just a tale buried beneath ancient stones or hidden in the lines of the Lost Book of Enki. It is a mirror held up to the soul of mankind, a reflection of power, creation, exile, hope, and the long road to remembrance. We are not just children of Earth. We are witnesses to a celestial history written in starlight and sealed with golden veins. The gods who came from Nibiru left behind more than cities, more than kings, more than wars. They left behind questions, sacred, haunting, eternal questions that echo louder with every generation. What if humanity was not born but built? What if we carry within us the breath of Enki, the command of Enlil, the rebellion of Marduk, the sorrow of Anzu? What if our wars, our worship, our wisdom, and our wounds are not merely random, but reverberations from a divine fracture still echoing across time? Every civilization rises with a myth. Every soul awakens with a story. And maybe, just maybe, we are ready to rewrite ours. If you've ever stared at the stars and felt like something was missing, if you've ever wept for a world that seems too heavy, too cruel, too lost, if you've ever whispered into the silence and hoped someone, somewhere still listens, then you are already part of this journey. You are already remembering. And memory, in a world trained to forget, is a revolution of the heart. The Annunaki, Enki, Nibiru, Igigi, Gold, Tiamat, and the Tablets of Destiny. These are not relics of fantasy. These are chapters of a shared origin, encrypted in myth, scattered in sacred texts, waiting for seekers like you to gather the pieces. You are not here by accident. The light you carry is not small. You were never meant to crawl in the shadow of gods. You were always meant to rise, and if this video touched even the softest corner of your soul, if something stirred in your heart like a flame being relit, if these words helped you find clarity amidst confusion or a spark of truth amidst silence, I invite you, gently and sincerely, to support this path. A single moment of encouragement, a simple gesture of energy, is a sacred offering in itself. If this content gave you light in your darkest night, I invite you to help me continue to share that light with others. Your likes, your subscriptions, your presence here, they mean more than numbers. They are the constellation we build together, the temple of memory we raise stone by stone, soul by soul. Every act of support is a prayer answered, every comment a thread in this sacred tapestry. So, if your heart feels moved, leave a sign below. Share what you felt, or ask what others might not dare to. Were we created by gods, or are we the ones who will become them? And if your spirit feels called to uplift this mission with a bit of your energy, know that even the smallest gesture becomes a blessing. I hold each one close. I cherish every act of faith. Thank you. Not just with words, but with breath, with reverence, with the beating rhythm of a heart that still believes in healing, in history, in holiness. Thank you for walking this path beside me. Thank you for remembering with me. May your days be filled with the light of Nibiru's sky, the wisdom of Enki's river, and the strength of a soul born to rise. Until the next revelation, stay awakened, stay whole. And never forget, the divine was never far. It was always within,